18 years in terms of anti-doping involvement, and the last 4 years with Sport Integrity Australia, where our involvement's grown from just a focus on anti-doping into the other areas of sport integrity. My philosophy has always been, in Australian terms, to just play a straight bat. Nothing's personal. The rules are the rules, and you've got to look at it and do your job. One of the things that I'm really proud of in terms of my work here in Australia is just how much influence Australians have been able to have in terms of the operations of WADA and the global anti-doping community. That there's so many different stakeholders with different views, politically, culturally, and I think you have to be sensitive to that. We shouldn't ever lose sight of the fact that this whole entire system is primarily for one group of stakeholders, and that's the athletes.
Welcome to Onside, the official podcast of Sport Integrity Australia. Our mission is to protect the integrity of sport and the health and welfare of those who participate in Australian sport.
Hello and welcome to Onside. I'm Tim Gavel. This month, the team at Sport Integrity Australia bids farewell to Darren Mullaly as he packs up a rich history in Australian sport, taking on the role of Government Relations Director at the World Anti-Doping Agency in Montreal. A well-known figure in sporting circles, Darren departs following an 18-year career protecting the integrity of sport in Australia. Darren joined the former Australian Sports Anti-Doping Authority, ASADA, in 2006, taking on a role in legal services. In 2020, with the creation of Sport Integrity Australia, Darren became Deputy CEO of Strategy and International Engagement. He has an impressive biography, including representing the Australian Minister for Sport and the Australian Government at key international sport integrity meetings, and being the Minister for Sport's Registered Deputy at the WADA Executive Committee and Foundation Board meetings. The new role at WADA offers Darren the opportunity to spread his wings further. However, he leaves a proud legacy at Sport Integrity Australia. So Darren, congratulations. Huge job, isn't it? Director of Government Relations with WADA. Geopolitical issues aside, it is just a massive job.
Yeah, it is going to be a big job. I think there's over 190 governments that are involved in the anti-doping system and are partners with WADA. So I'm sure there'll be lots of different time zones and lots of different stakeholders and governments to talk to. And then you've got the intergovernmental organisations as well that the role looks after. So organisations like the Council of Europe and UNESCO are probably the two biggest ones.
People probably don't realise the role that governments play in WADA. They think that it's just a world anti-doping agency receiving funding from governments, but governments actually play a significant role, don't they?
They play a huge role. They're a 50% funder along with the International Olympic Committee in terms of WADA's operations, but also you look at most governments will also fund the National Anti-Doping Organisation and instrumental in terms of setting up a large part of the anti-doping ecosystem in terms of legislation and the implementation of anti-doping policy. You've got the linkages outside of anti-doping organisations with customs, border force, law enforcement that are normally government agencies as well. So governments play a huge role in terms of how anti-doping works.
I mentioned their geopolitical issues. You're going to have to walk a tightrope, aren't you? It's a very delicate operation that you're going to be conducting.
It certainly can be, and I think we've seen that quite recently. But one of the good things, I think, in terms of this area is that generally most of the stakeholders believe in the fundamental goal in terms of clean sport and making sure that athletes aren't, hurting their health and other things by taking substances that they shouldn't be taking. So there's a lot of commonality there, which is surprising. Sometimes there's certainly some disagreements, but I think that goes with a lot of areas of sport where sport can be quite political.
In terms of anti-doping in Australia, how big is this role? This is significant, isn't it?
It is. It's something that I have to pinch myself sometimes in terms of, spending so much time in an Australian environment and then being able to take skills and to work on sort of the global stage is something that I didn't always sort of think about or aspire to. But it's a fantastic opportunity. And Australia, I think, over quite a period of time has been a leader in the anti-doping space. One of the things that I'm really proud of in terms of my work here in Australia is just how much influence Australians have been able to have in terms of the operations of WADA and the global anti-doping community. There's a variety of different working groups or standing committees that WADA has, and since the creation of SIA, I think there's about 9 new Australians who have gone on to standing committees to do important work on the global stage. And one of the really impressive things, I think, is that the appointments that we've managed to get onto those have also been 9 females, which is a great outcome and a great result.
So do you see your appointment as a reflection on the status that Australia has in the world anti-doping community?
I think so. I think we've been a leader, and it's not just work I've done. It's all of those people that contribute to the system and are willing to work hard and make the system better incrementally over a number of years that holds Australians in a good stead in terms of being able to contribute to the global anti-doping movement. So
how is Australia viewed on the world stage, given that you're now dancing in that area?
Look, I think quite positively. I think not just Australia. I think our region as a whole. We have been a regular contributor in terms of the WADA Executive Committee and Foundation Board for a number of years, along with New Zealand and in more recent years Samoa. And I think as a region we're quite small in terms of numbers, but in terms of our involvement and our willingness to have a crack and get involved and try and find solutions to things holds us in good stead with a lot of people in the system.
From a wider point of view, you're going to be obviously working in Montreal. Do you still keep a close eye on what's happening in Australia, or is it far more global, your role?
It's far more global in terms of my role, but I'll always be an Aussie, so I'm sure that I'll keep an eye on some things that are happening. But just the enormity of the job and the position means that I'm going to be focusing on many other things. So time might be a challenge in terms of paying real close attention to things happening down under. But I'll do my best in that respect. But in terms of the job itself, obviously working for the independent or the equivalent of the independent regulator. While I joke about it, there's you've got to be independent in how you approach things, recognising, like you said at the start, that there's so many different stakeholders with different views, politically, culturally, and I think you have to be sensitive to that.
Yes, effectively cutting the umbilical cord, because you've been involved with ASADA before Sport Integrity Australia. How long have you been involved in anti-doping in Australia? I
started in anti-doping. I'd actually been teaching a sports law subject back in 2005 and then came to the Australian Sports Anti-Doping Authority in 2006. So 18 years in terms of anti-doping involvement, and the last 4 years with Sport Integrity Australia, where our involvement's grown from just a focus on anti-doping into the other areas of sport integrity.
Been a lot of changes, haven't there, in the anti-doping world?
There sure has. I think one of the biggest changes that I've seen in my time in terms of anti-doping would have to just be the system itself and the level of complexity. It was much simpler times back in 2006. Not saying they were better times, but over the years, you've seen the development of the code, the development of the system. I think there was only a handful of documents that you had to pay attention to in the early days, and that's just grown and increased over time. As doping has gotten more sophisticated, the response has also ended up being more sophisticated, which has created a new level of complexity, and it's difficult, I think, for all stakeholders to grasp. But education in particular in terms of athletes, and that's one area that has really grown significantly, particularly in the last sort of 10 years, to cope with the changes in the rules and the level of complexity in the system.
How have you dealt with the scrutiny on the agency? Because over the years there have been some major cases. How have you dealt with it? You say, listen, let's stick to the code and carry out the requirements of the code. Is that the way that you've dealt with it?
Yeah, it's really tough, particularly with I don't think a lot of people understand the secrecy provisions in the legislation, and that's something that's been difficult. You go to a barbecue and most Australians like their sport, so if there's something in the media, friends and family and other people want to try and pin you down in terms of what's happening or what your views are on something, and it's not something that you can respond to easily and share. But at the end of the day, my philosophy has always been, in Australian terms, to just play a straight bat. Nothing's personal. The rules are the rules, and you've got to look at it and do your job. And that's what I've always tried to do, back from when I was a lawyer running anti-doping cases in Australia to the work that I do now. There's scope to have difficult conversations. Not everyone's going to agree on the outcome. And over time, there's opportunities to seize on those disagreements and look for ways to improve the system. And I think that's a good thing.
Yes, because the athlete voice has become quite prominent, and certainly we get advice here at Sport Integrity Australia from an athlete advisory group. It's become quite prominent, hasn't it, the athlete voice in guiding world anti-doping and the system itself? Yeah,
which is Australia played a critical role in the sense that it was Australia sitting on the working group in terms of looking at changes to the Athlete Council and increasing the size of the Athlete Council, which has been a really positive outcome. I mean, we shouldn't ever lose sight of the fact that this whole entire system is primarily for one group of stakeholders, and that's the athletes.
What have been some of the highlights for you, if you look back, and the memories you have of working in the anti-doping system in Australia for 18 years, but most importantly at ASADA and Sport Integrity Australia?
I think if I was to pick, it's hard, but if I was to pick one particular highlight, it would be the home Commonwealth Games on the Gold Coast in 2018. Being a Gold Coast boy originally, the opportunity to work on the anti-doping program and deliver that program for the Gold Coast Commonwealth Games was a lot of hard work, but an incredibly rewarding experience. And I think the way that the Gold Coast program was run in terms of the games, where you had able-bodied and para events competing with each other, I'll certainly never forget the athletics at the Gold Coast for gold medals and different races. Like, it was a great experience. A lot of hard work, but something that I look back on and I'm really glad that I was involved with. And I think for anyone who's still in the area in Australia or wants to get into the area in Australia, I think Brisbane 2032 will even top that in terms of just to host a home Olympic and Paralympic Games again in Brisbane will just be an incredible opportunity for anyone that gets to work on that.
And like the Commonwealth Games, certainly the Brisbane 2032 Olympics and Paralympics does provide a platform for Sport Integrity Australia to further explain exactly what it does, because there is still, to a certain degree, some confusion about, for instance, what is banned, what's not banned in competition, out of competition, who does what, the independence of WADA when it comes to testing and analysis. So it's a real opportunity, isn't it, for Australia to educate the population?
Absolutely, and you've got other organisations like the International Testing Agency who have primary responsibility for the conduct of the anti-doping program at the Games, but regularly work with organisations like Sport Integrity Australia in terms of actually delivering the program. And the real opportunity, I think, for organisations involved with Brisbane 2032 is making it the regional Games and bringing in our Pacifica colleagues and doing something special, not just across anti-doping, but also the other sports integrity areas.
Yeah, so the legacy can be sport integrity for beyond the Games itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's something, whether you look at safeguarding or competition manipulation, anti-doping, there's been a lot of growth in terms of organisations around the world who I think have looked at Sport Integrity Australia's model and have gone down the path to varying degrees to create broader sports integrity units, and even organisations like the International Olympic Committee who have got their different units within that organisation that look at all of those things, create a pretty unique opportunity for us down the track.
All right, Darren, thanks very much for joining On Side.
Thanks, Tim.
How's your French? All right?
My French, I am going to have to take some French lessons, but I'm committed to that. So next time that we talk to each other, hopefully I'll have some impressive phrases for you. But at the moment, unfortunately, it's probably not that good.
Yes, because you are moving to Montreal, and we wish you well and thank you for your contribution in Australia, Darren.
Thank you. And if you know anyone that's got jackets that cope with minus 35 degrees in the middle of winter, let me know.
Good on you, Darren.
Thanks, Tim.
Well, thanks for listening to Onside. We'll be back with a new episode shortly.
You've been listening to Onside, the official podcast of Sport Integrity Australia. Send in your podcast questions or suggestions to media@sportintegrity.gov.au. For more information on Sport Integrity Australia, please visit our website www.sportintegrity.gov.au or check out our Clean Sport app.